Hello, thank you so much for watching. I'm Jim Falk. The last time that the United States passed major immigration reform was back in 1986. Now, while opinions range widely on possible options, there's widespread agreement that change is long overdue. To discuss possible paths forward, let's welcome three experts with, as you will see, I suspect, different perspectives. Coming from Washington, D.C., is the CATO Institute's Associate Director of Immigration Studies, David Bier. Laura Reese is the director of the Heritage Foundation's Border and Immigration Center, and Danny Bahar is a non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institution and an associate professor of international and public affairs at Brown University. Now, to frame our discussion, I think it's important to keep in mind that there are two distinct categories when we talk about the subject of immigration: those who enter or wish to enter illegally, and those who cross illegally, that is, without proper documentation. So let's first, to get a sense of what the issue is, David, I'll go to you. What percentage of total U.S. population is made up of immigrants? And has there been much change, fluctuation in the last, I don't know, 5, 6 years?
Well, about 14% of the U.S. population are immigrants or naturalized citizens and non-citizens. This percentage has increased less than 1%, 1 percentage point over the last decade. So very, very gradual increase. Of course, this is, not reflective of the fact that the birth rate in the United States is going down. So immigration coming to this country has a bigger effect on the immigrant share than it normally would. But on an annual basis, we only allow about 1/3% of our population to increase through immigration.
Now, you all have done something I thought was really interesting, this green card game, and I have to admit that I stuck some information in it. I'd like you to tell our viewers about it.
The green card game is an opportunity for Americans to try to get a green card or legal permanent residence through our current immigration system. So you can enter all your own information, or you can enter the information of one of your ancestors, see if you can get a green card through our current immigration rules. And it's really difficult. Tens of thousands of people have played the game. About 2% have managed to game it enough to get a green card. And that's about the percentage of people who next year will get a green card through our immigration system. 97% of the people who are seeking to get a green card right now only will not get a green card next year. So only 3% on an annual basis get a green card through our immigration system.
So, what you're saying, it's a long line. I want to come back to you and to Danny in a minute, but Laura, give us a sense now of why in 2022, and I believe in 2023, we're seeing such a high number of attempts to cross the border without documentation illegally.
Well, that's because when the Biden administration came into office, they made it very clear that the border is open, despite their statements that the border is secure and it is not open. But results matter. And so as more and more illegal aliens have been able to come into the U.S., they will call home and let their relatives and friends know, hey, now's the time to come because, I got in. And the word has spread. And just during the Biden administration, foreign nationals from over 160 countries, that's about 80% of the world's countries, have entered or have been encountered by CBP, most of whom they're letting in. And so the numbers have risen to historic levels. And now we've reached the point where during the Biden administration, over 3.2 million illegal aliens have been encountered, plus another at least 1.6 million known Godaway population who evaded the Border Patrol and gave up really a free plane ticket to anywhere in the U.S. that they wanted to go because they didn't want to be caught. And that's a real national security threat that we need to be taking seriously.
Well, we'll come back to the national security threat in a minute, but where are these people coming from? Is it it used to be Mexico, but is that no longer the case?
Yeah, the numbers have shifted, a decade ago to more from Central America, but really now it is from all over the world. because that message has been sent out that the border's open and now's the time to come. And so people are taking advantage of it.
Danny, how do you see that?
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of bring data to the conversation, and not only anecdotes. On your last question, yes, we've seen indeed that the rise of migration flows are coming to Central America. Over the past year or two, we've seen a huge inflow from Venezuelans, from where I'm from originally. And yeah, it creates a bit of a challenge to the U.S. to rethink its public policy with respect to immigration. I do want to think that the reason I'm an economist, and we always think about demand and supply, and there's a clear demand component here that migrants are thinking when they try to come to the U.S., whether it's undocumented or not, is because there is a really hot job market. It's a really hot labor market, and there's shortages of workers everywhere in the U.S., in every county, in every city, that migrants think that they can fill, and that they can fill those positions. And the truth is that they can. When we're talking, for instance, about the Venezuelans, which, by the way, they're now being deported by the administration after certain agreements. What we see is that all this discussion that was in the U.S. about certain governors playing with these people, sending them from blue states to red states and vice versa, across the aisle, the speech was like, we don't want these people. But nobody did the job. Nobody did of actually looking at who these people were, what occupations they have, what are their skills. Let me tell you, I did the job. And when you look at the occupations that these people are filling, the work that they can do, for instance, driving trucks, for instance, helping in restaurants, for instance, cooks or health aides or a number of fundamental occupations. These are the same occupations that are in high demand in the U.S. And even just to finish with the sentences, if any of the viewers can just now go and Google the Bureau of Labor Statistics projection of workers over the next 10 years, what you're going to see is that the U.S. is not only growing in demand for engineers and doctors, it's also growing in demand for truck drivers and home care aides and a bunch of different occupations, for which, by the way, that complement each other. Because a doctor can't be a doctor without that.
So going back, Laura, to the unskilled workers, what type of reform could we or should we perhaps do so that these folks can come in to fill necessary jobs?
Well, right now our border is in chaos. We need to secure the border. And I would note that major populations that suffer from mass illegal immigration are legal immigrant applicants themselves, people who have already filed applications with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services and are buried in the backlog of over 8 million cases pending at USCIS, because USCIS is focusing its resources on asylum applications and the work authorization documents that flow from that or from temporary protected status. And so applicants who filed for other types of guest worker programs, what have you, they have to wait longer. And I don't understand why the employers and the Chamber of Congress don't call out illegal immigration and call for the White House to prevent it, to encourage not just legal immigration, but to get through the legal applications more expeditiously.
Requesting for asylum is a legal process in the U.S., and everybody who actually come to the border of the U.S. who feels he's been persecuted in their country of origin, they can ask for asylum applications. So I think it's unfair to put those people in the same bucket.
I think Laura might say that our asylum, Laura, I'm not talking about words here, I'll let you do it, but are they too broad?
Yes, and there's people know that to game the system and to get into the U.S. and stay here, file a frivolous asylum application. It will buy you years here. It will get you a work authorization document, and that's what people are coming here to do largely. And meanwhile, those who are truly persecuted, their cases are waiting, buried in the backlogs.
Look, I think it's up to the system to decide which refugee application is valid or not to us in a TV show. So I think that if there is a backlog. That's absolutely right. That's a factual statement. I think that imposes a challenge, an administrative challenge to the U.S. because the number of refugees maybe coming from climate change that could happen over the next 10 years that could increase. So we need to be prepared to deal with people who are asking for asylum and have the due process happen. I don't think we should assume who is quote unquote cheating the system or not. I think that there's a due process for that, and who are we to start judging what percentage of individuals are being truthful or not. I think that if they're asking for it, I think the due process should happen.
David, I see you nodding your head. I'm not sure if you're saying no or yes, but tell me what you're thinking.
Well, look, they're both right. There's this issue of so many people coming in through an asylum system that's very restrictive. So, yeah, most of them are going to get denied, but that's too bad. We should lower the requirements for asylum and let more people come in legally. So it is a legal way. Most of them do get rejected, but that's a problem. That's a problem that we can fix by changing our laws to reflect the reality of these large movements of people and the reality of our demographic decline. Our population growth rate is down 90% from its highs during the 19th century. We can accommodate tens of millions more people. To get our labor force growth rate back to just what it was in the 1980s would take 50 million more workers over the next decade. Over the 2010s, our labor force increased just 7 million. So there are massive deficits in terms of the amount of workers who are entering our labor force each year. You're seeing that reflected in labor demand, the shortages that have been discussed in all levels, whether it's high skilled and low skilled. And our legal immigration system hasn't been updated at all since 1990. So that's 3 decades where we're stuck with the same exact caps and limits that were set way below demand even in 1990. So we need massive reform to our immigration system to address both the problems at the border and the problems of our outdated economic system.
Laura, do you accept the economic argument that we hear from David and Danny that we need more workers in the United States?
Well, the economy and the labor force still has not returned to normal post-COVID. There are many Americans who are no longer looking for work. So I would disagree that we should just be importing millions more. And in terms of ability to handle that, I mean, New York City and Chicago show that is not true. Their mayors are decrying the numbers of people who have arrived in those cities. They cannot shelter them. The residents of the south side of Chicago are arguing that, look, you're taking away our jobs, our housing. And so, no, there are direct impacts on this. Public schools, hospitals, healthcare. The list goes on and on. You cannot have unlimited immigration and a welfare state and still survive to be a country.
Well, I just know in Texas, all I see is help wanted signs at restaurants and construction companies.
Look, I mean, you're talking about the side effects of a restrictive immigration policy that says when people come into the United States, they can't work. They can't come here legally and line up jobs in advance because they don't know if they're going to get in under our restrictive laws or not. Over 50% of the people who cross the border under this administration are expelled. So you're playing a lottery. You have no idea what's going to happen. You have no idea if you're going to be released or kicked back. And that's a problem. That's a problem created by our restrictive immigration laws. We could fix it by having a legal immigration system that works.
Danny, what do you think is the biggest misperception that we have about immigration in the United States right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the biggest by far, which goes back a little bit to the conversation that we're having here, is the idea that migrants take something from others, particularly, for instance, jobs. it's a very intuitive way to think that there's one job and it's either the local will have it or the immigrant will have it. The truth is that there's dozens of, not maybe hundreds of peer-reviewed, rigorous papers looking at this question. I've written a couple myself, in which those effects are negligible. If at most they're negligible. Often they're zero. So there's really no evidence of immigrants affecting the labor market outcomes of natives. And I'm talking here about data, not anecdotes, data. And the reason that this doesn't exist, that we don't see it, is because we tend to forget immigrants also eat. Immigrants also wear clothes. They consume. They increase the demand of the local economy where they're coming. Of course, that's even more the case if they're given the ability to work, not if you don't let them work. And that's what economic growth is about. Economic growth is about productivity growth that often comes from demand growth, right? So that's, I think, is the biggest misconception. And just to add, I think that the other, maybe not a misconception, but the part that we're missing in this discussion is that all the other huge benefits beyond labor markets that migrants tend to bring, creation of new firms,
we'll come back,
entrepreneurship, innovation, etc.
We'll come back to that because I know you have some thoughts about innovation and the impact that immigrants have had. But Laura, your specialty, I think, and you've written and testified before Congress quite a bit about security. And I have a quote here from you where you said, hundreds of suspects on the FBI's terrorist watch list have been arrested at the border, including many by military-aged males from all over the world, including terrorist hotbeds in the Middle East. Tell us what the numbers are on that and how do you get that data?
Right. So Customs and Border Protection reports this number. And in fiscal year 23, which just ended September 30th, just between the ports of entry, Border Patrol encountered 172 foreigners who were hit on the terror watch list. Now, by comparison, in FY19, that number was 3 in a year. And so we have to note when drastic changes like that occur and ask ourselves why. And again, it's because the world knows our border is wide open. This administration is letting most people in. And those were just the people that were caught. Again, keep in mind, we have to remember that number. Over 1.6 million known gotaways are estimated to be inside the U.S., and that's the population we really have to worry about.
But it seems to me that from what I've read, that the terrorist watch list is very broad, and it's capturing people who may be involved in some type of organization in their own country, or they've made a telephone call, or have a relative or a friend. But David, I see you have your hand up, so let's hear from you.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, the terrorist watch list is incredibly broad. It groups in all these family members and associates, and anybody who's remotely connected can be put on the terror watch list. And we know what's behind the increase. It's the fact that we had this peace deal in Colombia. All these people who are former members of FARC are coming to the border with a lot of other very peaceful Colombians who are leaving Colombia at the same time. And that's what explains the increase. Now, there's never been a terrorist attack by anyone from FARC in the entire history of the United States against U.S. citizens in the United States. There's no reason to believe that this is some big terrorist threat. But I would say that if we had people who are coming for peaceful reasons coming in legally, that would free up Border Patrol to spend more time patrolling for actual security threats, including, I mean, a lot of these FARC people, we don't want them in the country. But the idea that we need to spend all day talking about how we need to keep everyone out and shut down asylum as a result of 100 people from Colombia who, may have been part of FARC at some point is just a bad implication. We need a better legal immigration system to free up Border Patrol's resources to go after actual threats to the United States.
Laura, let's hear from you.
Yes, FBI Director Christopher Wray would disagree. He just testified this week that the terror threat in the U.S. is very real and needs to be taken seriously, particularly given the attacks that have been ongoing starting October 7th in Israel. He is worried about Hamas. He is worried about Hezbollah. He's worried about Iran's abilities to go after our critical infrastructure and cybersecurity. So we're not talking FARC here right now. We're talking about state sponsors of terrorism, the worst of the worst. And our FBI director is concerned. We should not ignore that.
What do we see on the northern border?
That is always been pretty wide open. It just has not received the same number of Border Patrol agents that the southern border does. And so it's always a concern. And unfortunately, it doesn't get a lot of attention.
Well, I'd like to think that there's a solution somewhere on this, and there's such wide disagreement. Let's look at it, I guess, from each political party. Why has it been so difficult for the Republicans to reach consensus on this? And then why has it been difficult for the Democrats? What are the key issues for both parties not to be able to reach what they call comprehensive immigration reform? Danny?
Yeah, look, I first of all, I do disagree with the notion, with the opinion that the border is wide open. There are facts. I immigrated to this country. David talked about the fantastic game they have on the CATO Institute website. It's really hard to immigrate to this country. And actually that's reflected on the data, because what we've seen in the data is that more and more high-skilled people are actually the ones that are a bigger share of the immigration flow in the country, because it's hard, it's costly, it costs
Right,
a
but
lot of money.
there you're talking about people who are trying to do legal immigration, not those who are coming across claiming asylum or perhaps who are undocumented.
Right, the ones who are undocumented, it's not a walk in the park for them. They are, first of all, crossing from Venezuela the Darien Gap through Panama, which is highly dangerous. They expose their lives, and so you have to be really desperate to do that. And then, you have a whole black market, which is a terrible thing, of coyotes trying to get you in. So if the black market is there, it means that there's restrictions. It doesn't mean that you can just walk in the park, right? So let's just be factual here. That doesn't mean that there cannot be better, improvements, but comparing it to a wide open border, that I think is an exaggeration. In terms of policy, look, every single policy has trade-offs. Migration policy also has trade-offs. So that's why it's our duty when it comes to policy making is to evaluate the data and try to see if the benefits outweigh the costs. And there are risks in every single policy. And I think, to me, and perhaps this is more, I think the data is clear, but even I will say, take it as an opinion, the benefits completely outweigh the costs here.
Laura, closing comments, please.
Well, your question was, why can't Congress agree?
Yeah.
Immigration is a very emotional, personal issue, and it affects all aspects of our lives, whether it's the economy, healthcare, crime, education, you name it. And the parties have just grown farther and farther apart. There used to be aspects that were bipartisan. For example, there used to be agreement about the border wall. Biden, Clinton, Obama, they all voted for border wall in the past. But the left is no longer there anymore. They have bought into a more open border. And by the way, the migrants who are crossing right now will tell when asked, why are you coming? Well, because the border is open, and now is the time. So, they're telling us how they're getting here. But what needs to be done is to secure that border and to encourage people to use the lawful pathways, truly lawful immigration benefits proposed by Congress, not Secretary Mayorkas,
Right.
and to discourage the illegal immigration.
David, let's hear your last word.
My view is that both parties want to deal with illegal immigration after it happens. Democrats are focused on providing a path to citizenship for people who are here. Republicans spend their whole time thinking about how we can have mass deportation and remove everyone who's here illegally. I think the parties could really come together by focusing on the needs of this country, the demographic needs of this country, the fact that population and labor force are in decline, and focus on curing illegal immigration before it happens with a legal immigration system that works, that's functional, that provides a viable path.
What percentage of the total U.S. population is made up of immigrants, and has that number fluctuated very much in the last few years?
About 14% of the U.S. population is foreign-born. That's increased by less than 1 percentage point over the last decade. So not much fluctuation. We have a very tightly controlled legal immigration system, so that prevents the immigrant share of the population from increasing very significantly over time. It's the legal immigration restrictions that ultimately prevent the immigrant share of the population from increasing to levels like we see in Canada, where 23% of their population is foreign born.
Well, I wish we had more time, and I want to thank all three of you for spending part of your day with us. You've given our audience a lot to think about, and I also want to encourage everyone to go to your respective websites because you've written and testified before Congress, so lots of good information, food for thought. So we hope that today's discussion has provided you with helpful background and some clarity on this critical and certainly contentious topic, which likely will continue to be one of the defining issues in the upcoming presidential contest. Thank you so much for joining our conversation, where we talk about things that matter with people who care.